So let's dive into one of the most personal and honestly surprising letters ever written, the Apostle Paul's letter to the Philippians. What makes this so compelling isn't just what it says, but the massive puzzle right at the heart of it. I mean, really think about that for a second. Paul is in chains, probably in Rome, and his future is, well, it's not looking great. And yet, this letter is just overflowing with words like joy and rejoice. It just doesn't add up. It's a total paradox. So how on earth is that possible? Well, it turns out the secret to unlocking this puzzle isn't just about Paul. It's about the people he was writing to. To really get why this letter is so full of joy, we have to go back. We have to understand the unique and kind of intense world of the Philippians. Okay, so welcome to Philippi. Now, you need to know this was no sleepy little village. This was a major city, a powerhouse Roman colony with a serious sense of pride, and maybe even a bit of an identity crisis. Philippi had this incredible history, this amazing pedigree. It was named for the father of Alexander the Great. I mean, that's some serious Greek street cred right there. Then, boom, a world-changing Roman battle happens right on their doorstep, and afterward, they become this special, privileged Roman colony. All of that history gave the people there a huge sense of their own importance. And this gets to a really important idea, Ischios Italicum. Now, this wasn't just some fancy-sounding Latin phrase. It meant that if you were a citizen of Philippi, you had all the rights of someone born and raised in Italy. You were governed by Roman law, and, get this, you were exempt from a lot of taxes. You can bet that was a huge source of their civic pride. So you've got this fascinating tension baked right into the city. On one hand, they have this deep, deep pride in their Greek heritage, the whole legacy of Alexander the Great. But on the other hand, they were fiercely, fiercely proud of their Roman status and all the perks, legal and financial, that came with it. Latin was the main language, and Roman culture was everywhere. The whole city was basically designed to feel like a mini Rome. I mean, you could walk down the street and see Roman arches, forums, bathhouses. The coins had Roman inscriptions. It was a sophisticated, modern place. They even had advanced public toilets with a working sewage system. This was a thriving first-class city. So into this proud, complicated, Romanized Greek city, the Apostle Paul shows up. And the way his new community gets its start, well, it's about as far from a grand Roman-style institution as you could possibly get. So Paul gets to town, right? And his usual first stop is to find a local synagogue. But there isn't one, which probably tells you something about how this proud city felt about outsiders. So he does the next best thing. He goes down to the river, a common place for prayer, and who does he find? A group of women. And this is just incredible. The very first Christian convert in all of Europe is a woman named Lydia. She's not just anyone. She's an immigrant businesswoman who deals in luxury purple goods. The church doesn't start in some big official building. It starts in her house. From day one, this community was built differently. So you have this small, unconventional group led by an outsider and hosted by a businesswoman. And it doesn't take long for them to run into some serious trouble with the proud citizens of Philippi. But it's this conflict that's going to create a bond that nothing can break. And the spark that lights the whole fire isn't just some abstract religious debate. Nope, it's about money. Paul heals a slave girl who was being exploited by her owners because she could tell fortunes. And when her owners see their cash cow is gone, they are furious. Now listen carefully to the accusation they make. It's fascinating. They don't say, hey, these guys are offending our Greek gods. No, they appeal to their most powerful identity. They say these new customs are not lawful for us as Romans. They're using their Roman citizenship as a weapon. And the reaction is swift, brutal, and totally illegal. Paul, who was himself a Roman citizen, is publicly stripped and beaten with rods, then thrown into the maximum security part of the prison. All of it without a fair trial. It was a huge injustice that trampled all over his rights. And this right here, this is the crucial point. Paul's relationship with the Philippians wasn't just built on nice ideas or shared beliefs. It was forged in the fire of shared suffering. He was persecuted in their city for their sake, and that trauma created this deep, personal, unbreakable connection between them. So let's fast forward a few years. The tables have turned. Now it's Paul who's in prison, this time in Rome. And when he writes back to his friends in that proud Roman colony of Philippi, he delivers a message that's going to turn their entire worldview upside down. What he does is brilliant, really. He takes the one thing they cherish most, their citizenship, and he completely redefines it. He puts their earthly Roman citizenship, with all its pride and status and legal rights, side by side with a heavenly citizenship. And that one is defined by humility, by service, and by finding joy in suffering for a higher purpose. This was his masterstroke. He was basically telling them, look, that Roman citizenship you're so proud of, it's great, but it's temporary. Your true, permanent, most important identity is as a citizen of heaven. So start living like it. This was the source of his joy in a prison cell, and he wanted it to be their source of joy too. And check this out. That number, 42, it shows just how personal this letter was. The book of Philippians has 42 words in it that appear nowhere else in the entire New Testament. Paul was using very specific language, including words about citizenship that he knew would hit home with this very specific audience in this Roman colony. And that brings us all the way back to the mystery we started with. Paul could be joyful in a prison cell because his identity, his real citizenship, wasn't tied to his circumstances. It was somewhere else entirely. And it leaves us with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? In our world, which is so obsessed with status and achievements, what does it actually mean to find our deepest identity and our joy by belonging to a different kind of community?